Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's March 22nd, 2024 program, Should Eugene Adopt Star Voting? My name's Andrew Kalk, and I'm City Club's president. We're coming to you from our home at the 5th Street Market in the heart of downtown Eugene. It's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our speakers and to all of you joining us in person, online, and over the radio. For 3 decades, the City Club of Eugene has remained dedicated to its founding mission to build community vision through open inquiry. In accordance with our mission and purpose, we hope to help connect people throughout our community and across generations, identities, experiences, and perspectives. You are invited this week and every week to join us in this effort, to share your wisdom, to learn something new, and to take active steps to make a difference in this city and region we all love. Of course, we cannot do this work alone, so a special thank you today to our Platinum, Community, and Diamond sponsors. The Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, serving as a catalytic leader in creating a vibrant and diverse economy that drives economic opportunity and well-being. Kaiser Permanente, which exists to provide high-quality, affordable healthcare services and to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. More information at www.kp.org. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. More information at uoregon.edu. Peace Health has been proud to serve Eugene, Lane County, and beyond as your hometown healthcare partner for more than 80 years. The Peace Health mission is to keep you and your family healthy. Learn more at peacehealth.org. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. The AARP of Oregon is a trusted and positive force for social change, using the experience and leadership of volunteer members to benefit all Oregonians as we age. More information at states.aarp.org/Oregon. And thank you to the City of Eugene for its support as well. Now, whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a longtime listener, I invite you to support our work by becoming a member, a business or community sponsor, or volunteering to be part of a committee or our board. You can do all those things and more at cityclubofueugene.org. Your support and engagement make these community conversations possible. Now, for generations, most American elections have revolved around the same basic rule. Voters select their favorite candidate, and the candidate with the largest number of votes wins. Now, many times, the winner wins over 50% of the vote, but in many other cases, including 4 of the last 8 presidential elections, the winning candidate may be the choice of fewer than half the electorate. Sometimes they're elected with 25% of the vote, or even less. In recent years, reformers have wondered whether there's a better way to conduct our elections, one that leads to a more representative outcome by better reflecting the preferences of voters. This May, Eugene voters will decide whether to adopt one such reform for local elections: star voting. That's short for Score, Then Automatic Runoff. Under a star voting system, voters score candidates from 0 stars, that's for candidates you really don't like, up to 5 stars for candidates you really do like. The first count identifies the 2 highest scoring candidates as the finalists, and the second count, each vote automatically goes to the finalist the voter scored higher. The finalist with the most votes wins. And if you don't understand it yet, that's okay. We're going to have the experts explain it to you. Now, skeptics of this kind of voting reform often worry about the complexity of the proposed systems. They fear that a lack of voter understanding will translate into lower turnout and potentially a less representative outcome. And we'll talk about some of that today as well. We are very lucky to have 2 terrific guests with us today. Terry Parker, the president of the League of Women Voters of Lane County, who will discuss the current state of affairs in the voting reform movement, both in Eugene and statewide. And she'll be joined by Sarah Wolk, the executive director and founding member of the Equal Vote Coalition. That's a nonprofit that's the driving force behind star voting here in Eugene. Please welcome our panelists.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here and see this packed room. I know there's more people out on YouTube and on the radio, so it's absolutely a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to present about star voting. Fundamentally, for me, I am dauntless about this issue because I think it's the cause we need to be effective on every other issue. But before I get into that, our nonprofit's the Equal Vote Coalition, and Andrew did a great introduction. But basically, the idea here is that your vote should be just as powerful as mine, no matter who you are, where you live, how many candidates are on your side, how you affiliate, and so on and so on and so on. Right now, our voting method is not equal. We have a long way to go. We don't have the worst possible voting paradigm here in Oregon. We're actually luckier than most in a lot of ways, but there is absolutely room for improvement. So our current system, known as plurality, first past the post, we call it Voldemort because it's got so many confusing, wonky names that nobody can remember. So we prefer to call it choose one voting. It's where you choose one candidate only, and the candidate with the most votes wins. And it works fantastically if there are only two candidates in the race. But if we have a broader coalition, if we have more choices, that's where it really starts to break down. So most of us are familiar with this paradigm where we have a choice to vote for our favorite, but we're not sure that our favorite can win. And so the dilemma is, should I vote for the lesser evil, the front runner on my side, who seems more electable, who seems like the type of person who would win? Maybe they're the incumbent, maybe they've raised the most money, maybe they fit my internalized stereotypes of what a winner in our current political paradigm looks like. But this electability bias fundamentally entrenches disparities in representation and creates somewhat of a glass ceiling where new candidates face a lot of pressures to not even run in the first place. And then for voters, we face a lot of pressure to not vote for those candidates, even if we really do like them. And then once we do vote, it's hard to actually see how much support those candidates really had, because you can't show I supported my favorite and also this other person. So studies on the demographics of elected officials in the United States show that white men held 62% of elected offices in 2019, despite comprising only 30% of the population. The reality is that voting methods which give a strong advantage to those who are deemed most electable will continue to uphold these serious disparities, regardless of public opinion. And the problem, there are a lot of problems, and this is one piece of a much larger puzzle, but the problem that we're targeting here today, one step at a time, is called vote splitting. So on the left, in the graphic, if you guys can see it, and if not, imagine, we've got a 60% majority that's good guys. We've got Luke Skywalker representing the good guys there. And then we've got a 40% minority who prefer Darth Vader. And Luke Skywalker wins with 60%. But what if we add in his sister Leia? All of a sudden, we have two good guys. We have a broader coalition. She brings a lot to the table. She had the blueprints to the Death Star. And yet, they're able to split the vote, sending the winner over to Darth Vader with 40%. So it's a pretty broken system, and it's really broken just in the math. This is something that doesn't necessarily favor one faction or the other. We've had presidential elections that threw the election to the Democrats, that threw the election to the Republicans. So it's kind of a wild card. It does make our system more gameable, but it doesn't inherently favor one side or the other. What it does inherently favor is polarizing candidates, because the one who stands out in a vote-splitting paradigm is the candidate who doesn't have to compete with somebody on their left and on their right. So the candidate in the middle, the center of public opinion, is the one who's mathematically more likely to suffer from vote splitting and end up kind of divided and conquered. So for me, I started off my quest in voting reform, really focused on other issues, environmental issues, social justice issues. And it was, I think, around 2010 when I first heard of ranked choice voting. I was out building raised beds in my mom's yard, and a canvasser came door to door, and he was like, "Hey, have you heard of ranked choice voting?" I think he called it instant runoff at the time. And I was like, "No, what's that?" And he was like, "Well, you rank your candidates, it's safe to vote your conscience. Whether or not your favorite can win, your vote transfers to your next choice. And so it eliminates vote splitting and the spoiler effect." And I was acutely aware of this jargon, spoiler effect, because my first election that I ever voted in was kind of the infamous Ralph Nader, Al Gore, George Bush 2000 election. And that really laid the problem very bare for a lot of us. If that hadn't have happened, we would probably be in a very different world today. But I pinned the flyer to my wall. I said, I'm going to come back and work on this issue when I have a bit more time. I want to start volunteering. So I went to my first meeting for Ranked Choice Voting Oregon in 2016, and immediately realized that there were about a third advocates for multiple different voting methods. I hadn't realized there were choices there. And when I started to say and explain my position of why I preferred ranked choice, I repeated that same pitch, that same elevator pitch that had been given to me. But I had since read a ton of stuff all across the internet to back it up. And so I was shocked when I got fact-checked. People said, hey, it's more safe to vote your conscience. If there's only 2 frontrunners, it's safe to vote your conscience. But ranked choice doesn't totally solve that problem. And in terms of the wasted votes, it solves that type of wasted vote, but there are voided ballots, there's exhausted ballots. I said, what's that? And so we ended up in this disagreement about facts. I was like, no, I've read all of this stuff. I'm right, you're wrong. And we have this great proposal. Why would we derail it with a new idea? This is something that we should have solved yesterday. And so we realized we were somewhat at an impasse. We couldn't move forward without coming to an agreement on the facts, at least. We can disagree on strategy, viability, things like that, but we should at least agree on the facts. So I volunteered to head up the research committee, and that's where I learned that a lot of the claims that I had held as the most inspiring were oversold. They needed qualification. And so that begged the question, which voting method can deliver? So we had the foresight to decide on our criteria to choose a voting method as a body before we went forward and picked a method. We didn't pick the criteria that the method passed. We picked broad criteria that center our goals. And there's 5 of them. A voting method should be simple. It should be honest. It should empower honest voting. It should be expressive enough to get the data that we need. It should accurately represent the will of the people and elect candidates who are representative. And it should be equal. The voting method shouldn't play favorites. So in the middle of those 5 criteria, we as the Equal Vote Coalition really recommend star voting. Turns out our current system's very simple, kind of a train wreck on those other criteria. Ranked choice voting is very expressive, you're able to be more honest, but it doesn't pass the equal vote criterion, which requires that it allow you to bring the election back to tied. Like if it was tied before you voted, and then somebody equal and opposite voted, would you be able to vote and bring it back to a tie? That's kind of the test of balance for an equally weighted vote. And ranked choice voting, because it doesn't count all the rankings, doesn't always pass that. So star voting is pretty simple, and Andrew explained it fantastically. Basically, 5 best, 0 worst. It's the familiar 5-star rating that hundreds of millions of people all over the world have done a lot of times over. It's been widely studied as one of the most accurate ways to measure public opinion, and especially nuanced public opinion. So the instructions are, give your favorite 5 stars. Give your last choice 0 or leave them blank. Equal scores are allowed. And then you may score other candidates as desired. So for me, I've got my 5-star favorite. I've got my last choice there on the next line. I've got 2 candidates who are also really good, so I'm going to give them both 5 stars, which is totally allowed in star voting. And then I've got kind of a lesser evil candidate who I'm going to give 1 star to on this sample ballot that only some of you can see. And then star voting's counted in a 2-step process. Both rounds are addition, and it really kind of works like a primary and a general all-in-one. But for local offices, for nonpartisan elections like we have here in Eugene, we wouldn't even need to vote twice. Star voting is just, you vote once, you get the winner. So the first round's the scoring round. You add up all the scores from across all the ballots and find the 2 highest scoring candidates. Those are your finalists. Then, in the runoff, your ballot automatically counts as 1 vote for the finalist you prefer. The finalist with the most votes wins. So to break that down a little more, in the runoff, we're not measuring how much you liked the candidates anymore. Each ballot ultimately counts as 1 vote and represents 1 voter. So it really takes another age-old dilemma, quality versus quantity, and says, why not both? That first round measures quality of support. How much do we actually like these people? Are we inspired by them? Are they going to inspire us to turn out to vote? And then the second round says, okay, but how many of you actually are there? Do you prefer finalist A or finalist B? So that round really works just like a top 2 runoff in our current system. And you get really familiar results. The results with star voting are available instantly. You can get preliminary results as the ballots come in. And again, the finalist with the most votes wins. So it really slots into a traditional way of thinking about voting, even though it really is an outside of the box approach to get there. We're proposing star voting for Eugene for the May 21st, 2024 ballot. We collected tons of signatures over only 100 days. A third were collected by volunteers. Almost all were collected by Eugene residents, and we're extremely proud of everyone, including many of you here in this room that have helped to get us where we are today. It was nearly impossible, especially as a small local grassroots, largely unfunded. We battled wind and rain and pandemics and forest fires, and it was a lot. So I'm extremely excited that we made the ballot, and really glad that you're all turning out to learn more about star voting before you fill out that ballot. So basically what it would do is just change one thing. It would make star voting the default voting method for Eugene elections, and that's mayor, city council, and EWEB. It also would eliminate the primary for those city offices, so you would just vote once in November. Candidates would only need to run for office once. They wouldn't need to spend nearly as much time in office planning, fundraising, and campaigning for their next round. And in terms of implementation logistics, it's also really simple. That scoring round, again, you add up the stars. In that runoff round, you just add up the votes. So it can be tallied using our current infrastructure, and it's compatible with our current protocols. Basically, star voting would require a software upgrade and a recertification, which is routine and happens regularly anyways. With star voting, all ballot data is counted. Early returns, again, can be fully tallied and reported and broken down by local precinct or however you'd like to do that, just like now. Audits are simple. It's compatible with all of the bells and whistles of election integrity that we in Oregon are so famous for. And this is a stark difference to ranked choice voting, which you'll remember was the voting method I used to prefer. So with ranked choice, the devil's really in the details. The way it's counted is that you count the first choice votes, and then you transfer those votes to the voter's next choice, if possible. And then depending on the order of elimination, your next choice may or may not be counted. Some voters maybe didn't put a next choice, and that's their right. But for some voters, their next choice will have already been eliminated before their vote will transfer. And for other voters, the election will be called when there's a majority of remaining ballots before their second choice is counted. So some people will have their first choice eliminated and their next choice not counted. And that makes it much harder to tally. It means that you have to centralize all of the ballots statewide if you want to do this across jurisdictions. And you can't tally the ballots separately at the local level. So cost, implementation, all of that is pretty tricky with ranked choice voting. And another reason that we're promoting star voting over ranked choice voting is the voter disenfranchisement issue. So with our current system, it's got tons of problems. I think many of you know, but yeah, it's got tons of problems, but ranked choice has a different problem where we see really high numbers of voided ballots. And that's people who accidentally filled out their ballot wrong and it wasn't able to be counted. So in star voting, if you give two people the same score, you say, you're both my favorite, I love you both, mom and dad, 5 stars for both of you, that's totally allowed. If you have a preference, you should show it, but if you don't have a preference, give them the same score. And you can also skip scores in star voting. You don't have to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can do 5, 1, 0 or 5, 4, 0 or 5, 1, 0. It's totally up to you. In ranked choice, either of those behaviors can and would often void your ballot and make it not countable. And study after study has shown that where ranked choice voting has been used, spoiled ballot rates are higher for lower income voters. Studies, again, go further to confirm that that includes voters of color, especially voters who aren't English as a first language speakers, older voters, and again, low income voters. So that's a pretty simple system. I mean, it's a pretty simple problem that we owe it to voters to fix. Ranked choice voting was invented 150 years ago. It was great at that time but there's no reason we can't upgrade and address concerns like these. And it's been extensively studied. I had the honor of co-authoring a peer-reviewed study on how to choose a voting method. And that included a lot of considerations and criteria. If you go to equal.vote/articles, it's pinned right at the top, flagged with peer review. So I definitely encourage you all to dig into that website and read stuff. There's accessible content, there's peer review, and everything in between. But studies from recent studies from 5 years ago, studies from 10, 30 years ago, tend to all agree on the relative conclusions about how accurate are these different voting methods. How often do they run into things like the spoiler effect where they elect a candidate who wasn't the most representative? And these studies tend to show, or not tend to show, universally show that plurality voting, choose one voting, our current system that we use like for statewide elections here in Oregon, for example, is the least accurate. With about 70% accuracy in simulations when voters aren't strategic. So that's why we do see that super strong incentive to vote lesser evil or else. It does get better if voters are strategic, but we'd rather have a system where you don't need to do that. Our current system here in Eugene for Eugene elections is plurality top 2, and that is a little better. And then what we see is that instant runoff ranked choice voting tests pretty similar to top 2, the system we already have. And a lot of people are surprised by that data. You would expect that a much more expressive ranked ballot would perform better than just a choose one primary and general election. But since most of those rankings, again, aren't ever counted, it can be a little, it can kind of overpromise and underdeliver. Next up in our studies come approval voting, the Condorcet voting methods. There are a number of other methods that we also endorse with Equal Vote Coalition because they are top shelf, they're accurate, they're equal, they're fair, and it's up to each jurisdiction to choose the voting method that works best for them. But these studies did show that star voting really tops the charts at around 99–98% accuracy, regardless if voters are honest, if they're taking viability into account, and even if they're trying to be strategic. In star voting, studies show that the best strategy is to give your favorite 5 stars, give your last choice 0, and show your honest preference order. Doing so ensures that no matter who those 2 finalists are, your vote will automatically go to the finalist you prefer. So there is really a strong incentive to follow the instructions on the ballot. Does that mean that we don't have to worry about strategic voting or voter behavior? Absolutely not. And that's why the Equal Vote Coalition has committed to contributing, working hand in hand with the city and the county clerks to ensure that the rollout of star voting, if we do pass it, is accessible, is inclusive, is multilingual, and that the full weight and might of Equal Vote Coalition and our volunteers around the country will be here to make sure we implement it well and do that voter education. We do expect there to be a little bit of a learning curve. A lot of people will probably be a little hesitant to try, to trust a new system. But again, having the incentive actually align with the voter behavior we want means that we can trust that voter behavior over time will get better, will get more expressive, not less and less. So just to sum it up, I know we're running out of time. With star voting 0-5, star rating. 5 stars best, 0 stars worst. It's counted in 2 rounds, score, then automatic runoff. And that's exactly how it works. It's going to be on the ballot May 21st, and we encourage everyone to vote yes. And Eugene would be the first to adopt star voting if we do so. It's been used by a number of groups, a number of organizations, political elections, primary elections, but we would be the first to pilot it on the municipal public election scale. So I really hope Eugene will take the call to action and lead on this issue. Star voting was invented here, and we really do have something to offer the rest of the world.
Can I close this?
Yeah, sure.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon. Well, it's not quite afternoon. Maybe it is afternoon. I haven't kept track. So my name is Terry Parker. I'm the current president of the League of Women Voters of Lane County. I want to introduce Nancy Mills. Nancy's with me right here. Nancy is the head of our voter services at the local league here in Lane, and she really is my brain trust. Nancy's the one who's really just done a deep dive into this issue and offered information for us internally to discuss this issue, which, if you know anything about the league, we do that ad nauseum. So I want to thank Mary Layton, whose cookies and tea got us here today, so thank you, Mary. A little bit about the league. The league is a nonpartisan political organization promoting informed and active participation in government, much like the City Club. We're dedicated to both voter education and to advocacy. We study issues, we review, we restudy, and we update our positions. And we do take strong stances on policy issues relating to voting rights, civil rights, and other social policy. We do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. When we do voter education like this, our goal is often to offer information that gives voters resources to prepare them to vote and aid in their own decision-making and fact-finding. We have several long 2-hour voter education sessions coming up in April, so if you don't get enough detail here, there's some more opportunities in the community to learn more. These are be co-sponsored with the Eugene Public Library. So if we don't get to all of your questions today, there will be other opportunities. There is no perfect voting method. And we're aware that there are other voting methods than STAR, which you've heard about already, such as ranked choice voting methods, and there are a variety of those. Many of you have heard about them or even participated in them, as these have been around for quite some time. And in recent times, there are data sets and commentary on their use. The use of star voting is an offshoot, that may not be the right word, for an evolution of ranked choice voting has been building its experience base. In this May election, it is only star voting option that's being considered for the Eugene municipal nonpartisan, and that's an important distinction, elections for mayor, city council, and EWEB commissioners. as it is the only signature gathering campaign that was run and met the criteria for being placed on the local ballot. The Eugene measure 20-349 on STAR, as you've already heard, stands for Score Then Automatic Runoff. It's an initiative that, simply put, is an up and down vote. A yes vote supports the replacement of the existing electoral system with STAR voting for the positions that we've mentioned. A no vote opposes the ballot initiative, and we keep voting now, the way we have always been doing it, using what is called plurality voting. There would be no change. So that's the decision that's coming up to you in May. The League of Women Voters of the U.S. has a position on voter representation and electoral systems, and it's lengthy, so I want to give you the reference because you can go and find this information yourself. The League of Women Voters U.S. website has a book called The Impact on Issues Guide to Public Policy Positions of the League of Women Voters. So it's not too hard to Google that and to find this information. For today, the League of Women Voters of U.S. promotes an open government system that's representative, accountable, and responsive. We encourage electoral methods that provide the broadest voter representation possible and are expressive of vote choices. Whether for single and multiple winner contests, the League supports electoral methods that, and this is going to be a little bit of repeat of what you heard from Sarah in terms of elections that encourage voter participation and voter engagement. Encourage those with minority opinions to participate, including underrepresented communities. Are verifiable and auditable. Promote access to voting. Maximize effective votes, minimize wasted votes. Promote sincere voting over strategic voting. Implement alternatives to plurality voting, and are compatible with acceptable ballot casting methods, including vote by mail. And the position goes on to state that the League of Women Voters supports enabling legislation to allow local jurisdictions to explore alternative electoral methods, as well as supporting state election laws, allowing for more options at both state and local levels. So that's kind of the language that when the League comes to a position, we come through it through those study mechanisms, and there's been a lot of work behind that statement. But I want to turn to opposition to the measure, because it's only fair to give you both sides of the issue. That would be part of what the League would be responsible for. The local League has had many discussions, formal and informal, about new voting methods. And while we stand by the League's position, we know that some voters are worried about whether these new election methods are too confusing. Not just STAR, but ranked voting and others. Is it just too confusing to change how we do it now? And some people just aren't interested in that change. So, too, advocates for a specific method, ranked choice voting or round-robin voting, or however you want to call it, pose that their preferred method is better, just as those who support STAR say their method is better. If you're not already aware, by referendum, Oregon voters will have the opportunity in November to vote on ranked choice voting as an election method. The Equal Vote Coalition is actively gathering signatures and hope to also be on the ballot. So you can imagine there might be some tension building. We have given, again, this a lot of thought. The League has been at this for some time, and we really don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. Signature gathering deadline to get on the November ballot is July 5th, and we won't know for certain what will be on the ballot in November until probably August. And we'll have that conversation. You'll have that decision to make at the November election. In closing, I'd like to impress upon you that the local League is really focused on this local election. It's thumbs up, thumbs down. And obviously, you need to have information about other methods if you're going to support this one. I'd like to impress upon you the importance of seeking out reliable resources. You know your own trusted resources of information. You might even look outside the box, dare I say, you know. In these times, it's easy to get caught up in a misinformation cycle. In October 2021, Nancy, our voter service director, put together an internal discussion piece on this topic. And what I so appreciated is that she referenced her resources, and those resources were current and up to date. So I have a list of those resources here. And this was just a small talking piece at the League, so her resources took up a whole page. What I want you to do, and I think what you all already do, knowing who's in the room, is that you are discerning about the information that you want to gather and to help make your decision. We recently had a presentation by the Lane County Clerk, the head of our elections division. We posed several questions to her about new methods. What does the elections division do about these different ballots? Can we have different ballots? You might want to go to the League of Women Voters lanecounty.org website. You can hear that presentation from your county elections clerk, Dina Dawson. And I have to say, our impression is that she's a rock star. I think we're very lucky to have her. So the questions you ask yourself, and this is where I always come back to, is that you're in charge, right? It's your vote. It's like, who does this appeal to? Who might get left out? What does experience tell us? Are we happy with the way it is now? Do you want change? And what kind of change do you want? So at this point, I think that really your questions are probably the more important part of the conversation today. And I think I'll close at that, Andrew, and we'll go into the next part. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Sarah. We'll begin our question and answer in just a moment, but first I'd like to thank the business and in-kind sponsors whose support helps to make City Club possible. Thank you to our gold sponsors, Network Charter School, Hirschner Hunter LLC, Evans Elder Brown and Subert, and Hudson Dental. Thank you also to our in-kind sponsors, KRVM 91.9 Radio, Alpha IT, Dotson's Photography, and Kid Sports. Also a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC FM 89.7, for airing City Club programs on Monday nights at 7 p.m. For those listening at home or in the car right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club on KLCC, and we love that you are here. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived on KLCC, as well as on our YouTube channel and as podcasts. We'll take a brief break before returning for question and answer. Thanks. Welcome back to the City Club of Eugene and our program on star voting. We'll welcome our first questioner now, Brian Smith, the co-director of the Tribal Democracy Project. Brian.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Smith. I use he, him pronouns, citizen of the Muskogee Nation. Quick thing on Tribal Democracy Project, we're a relatively new organization. Common Cause is our fiscal sponsor, so it's a good government group. And we've been lucky enough to have a partnership with them. At Tribal Democracy Project, a couple of things that we're working on immediately, and that has to do with civics education and voter enfranchisement of tribal and native communities in the state of Oregon, and also kind of get out the vote and electoral reforms. So in that, our philosophy is that electoral reforms need both to address the disenfranchisement of tribal communities and other communities of color, and also enable outcomes that reflect voter preference. We've identified a number of democratic reforms that are well tested and fit this criteria. We do have questions on star voting. And for my question context, when the Independent Party of Oregon used star voting for its 2020 primary, and that's where they just threw all the candidates in, Republican, Democrat, Independent, not affiliated, for certain positions. Top of the ticket, presidential ballot, Joe Biden defeated Trump 55% to 45% in the final round of voting. Yet down ticket in the Secretary of State's race, all the Democrats on the ballot didn't make the final round, taking third, fourth, and fifth respectively. And to us, this indicated an outcome that did not reflect voter preferences. So we're worried about experimentation on tribal communities, but also with the Eugene City Council. So the question, given that context and the potential and real possibility of outcomes on our city council races that don't reflect voter preferences, at least right off the bat, do you think star is preferable to the other empirically tested democratic reforms?
I do. So first off, thank you so much for your question and for your work. I had the pleasure of watching one of your videos and presentations on your redistricting work, and we would love to reach out and work further together, hopefully. In terms of use case scenarios, that Independent Party of Oregon election was a fabulous stress test for star voting. Independent Party of Oregon adopted star voting in 2020 and used it for their statewide primary. And for people who don't know, Independent Party is different from non-affiliated voter here in Oregon. So that's a specific group of people who register as Independent Party, and Independent Party's platform really centers around electoral reform. So that voter body was a really interesting wild card. It's the people in our current system who don't identify with either major party, one side or the other. They're the middle. And they're those swing voters that everyone's really coveting. So with star voting, we were able to get fabulous voter data on what those swing voters thought. There were 3 races. All 3 were pretty close. One did recommend the Democrat, one recommended the Republican. Joe Biden, I believe, won the presidential primary. The Secretary of State race, it was Kim Thatcher, the Republican. And then the treasurer race preferred the independent candidate. In all 3 of those races, the star voting data showed that the finalists preferred over all others won. So that's kind of one of the gold standards that we look at for, like, did this election fail to elect the candidate who's most representative according to the voter data that people voted. And yes, in all 3 of those races, the finalist who won was preferred over all other candidates. So that's the Condorcet winner for those of us wonks in the audience.
Great, thank you. Next question.
Hi everyone, my name is Ilana J. Wilson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Next Step and Next Step Action Fund. We are a nonprofit organization that engages the next generation of young leaders to build political power to fight for a more just and equitable Oregon. We've been doing it for 22 years now, almost as old as us. But yeah, fighting for democracy changes that you see now and making Oregon the easiest state to vote in. So, many organizations representing communities of color have come out against STAR, and none I am aware of are supporting it, as they say it disenfranchises voters. As an anti-racist organization fighting for racial and gender, economic disability, LGBTQ plus justice, we have some concerns that this will further disenfranchise and reduce the power of youth, working class voters, and other communities already left out in the elections. So can you claim STAR will be good for voters of color when no organizations representing those communities seem to agree?
Well, definitely people of color are diverse by definition and are not a monolith. So everyone doesn't agree, and we have tons of people who've been working on STAR voting for a very, very long time, and support from all sorts of groups that I'm really proud to stand with. In terms of are people of color worried about changing our voting method and worried about STAR as an untested, at this scale, new system? Absolutely, and I think that those concerns are valid, and I don't want to invalidate them. I think people of color in particular have more of a reason to not trust what they're reading and to really read between the lines, fact check, and there is a long history of political groups using groups of color to try and push their agenda. And so that's where I would encourage a lot of these organizations to really follow the money. STAR voting's a local grassroots, inclusive democratic movement. I'm the executive director, I'm female. That's kind of unprecedented in this electoral science STEM field. Our president is female. Our STAR Voting Action president is Latino. Our vice president is Black. Our other vice president of the Equal Vote Coalition is Indigenous from Standing Rock. So we have a really fabulous team, and we'd love to sit down with everyone and hash out your questions. We do have good answers.
Terry, I wonder if you could take that question also and talk a little bit about, in your experience, have there been demographic differences in terms of willingness to engage in the voting reform movement? Young people, old people, black, white, what have you seen around the state with regard to that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I can really speak to what's really happening around the state, because really our local league really focuses on local issues. So really this comes up kind of at a local level. We would be the expertise there. We absolutely know that the data sets that are available for ranked choice voting are longer. They've been out there longer. Australia's used it. You know, you have a lot of information and data sets out there. But now you're starting to also have data sets around STAR voting and how it happens. And so I think that what you see in change is the evolution of these methods. And again, all I can say is when you're looking for information, dig deep, look for references, look for the references and the commentary behind. And I think, again, knowing where the information's coming from is really very important.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jasia Mosley. I'm the Civic Action Organizer at Next Up and Next Up Action Fund. So my question, STAR voting has not been used in any public election anywhere across the world. It has only been used by 2 state political parties to select delegates or nominees for office, and after trying it once, it was never used again. There's not enough data to gauge how STAR voting would impact equitable outcomes in our elections or how voters, especially underrepresented voters, would be impacted. Why do STAR supporters not take into account real-world behavior and the voter experience?
I mean, the narrative that, you know, we should do what's been tested, we should do what's been tried, that's really an argument to uphold the status quo. We could keep doing what we've always done, and there's tons of data on that. We also know that that data is bad looking. It's not good data. It shows unrepresentative outcomes, and it shows serious problems in terms of all sorts of disparities. And the same goes for ranked choice voting. It's been used around the world. The 2 countries that have used it for around 100 years are both still 2-party dominated. They both have, around the country in the US, there's really high rates of exhausted ballots, and that's ballots that aren't able to transfer to the final round. In competitive elections that have more than 2 frontrunners, that's on average over 10% of ballots in ranked choice voting that aren't able to be counted in that final round. So this is real world data that we do care about.
Joel Corin, City Club member. In the 12 years that I've been here, I don't remember too many races that had 3 candidates. In this year's election in the city, the 3 of the council races have 2 candidates. 1 race has 1 candidate. The mayor's race does have 3 candidates. I think you may be having a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. My concern also, I find star voting confusing. If, in fact, the statewide ballot, which I assume applies to state offices, right? House, Senate. Okay. If that goes into effect, what you may have would be a ranked choice voting system for statewide offices and a star voting system for local offices. That might also be confusing. Do you agree?
I agree that that would be confusing. I think that we should really ask the question now and really kick the tires for these methods and pick the right one now.
Yes, I'm going to follow up because when we talked to the Lane County Elections Officer, we asked those questions. She really looked at how much time would be given in order to prepare for that election. So in this ballot measure that you're looking at, you wouldn't start using this new method until November 2026. And so, and if you look at I'm not sure about what's happening with the referendum at the state, but they give a period of time in which to prepare. Elections offices obviously have to get their computers working. They have to kind of make this thing work. Then they also have to figure out how to send out ballots. She indicated, again, because she's had experience in Colorado with ranked choice voting and other types of voting, she said, yes, it would be complicated, and yes, we do complicated things all the time. So I encourage you to listen to her responses because she didn't think that it would be, not that I'm disvaluing the fact that it could be confusing. That has been one of the things about any of these new voting methods.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that was a bit of a two-part question. Just really quickly, I wanted to hit the other part, which is this a solution to a problem we don't actually have? And then you described a problem where we don't have competitive elections at the local level. And that's not because we don't have diverse candidates. We don't have candidates with diverse viewpoints and diverse policy proposals for Eugene's, unique and serious problems that we all know we're facing. I think that star voting would help encourage a better spread of candidates, which would include, more candidates that people are more inspired to vote on. And I think that that would actually help drive voter turnout at the local level.
Mary Layton, City Club member, and this question is for Terry. Okay. The League of Women Voters of Oregon, about a year ago, released a statement regarding STAR, expressing several concerns. One is it's a form of range voting. Another is it does not accurately reflect voters' preferences. It's a cardinal rather than an ordinal system. It gives people the opportunity to vote strategically, and these were expressed as problems. How do you plan to address these?
Well, that's a question, and it's a complicated one, which
Yeah.
is why this discussion has brought me lost some sleep over that. We really support the League of Women Voters U.S. position, and we do that because we're really talking about this local position today. We're not talking about the state race. When we get to the state race, the League of Women of Oregon will have that discussion. And so today, we're talking about what's coming up in this particular race, and you don't have another choice. You have the choice of doing it the way we do it today, or you have the choice of putting in something new.
I'll add that on this issue again, the reason that I initially came to ranked choice voting, after having studied it extensively, I read the entire Fair Vote website and a ton of other groups that repeated the same talking points, and later came to find that a lot of those points were just wrong. Ranked choice voting is the subject of a hundreds of millions of dollars lobby nationally. And Nevada alone, just for the first round of their ranked choice voting, they spent $23 million at the statewide level last cycle, and then they're going to do it again. So there is a ton at stake here in terms of ranked choice voting. I think we're seeing such strong attacks against star voting because it really does beat ranked choice on the science. And so they want to kneecap it before it becomes a viable proposal that really has been tested and vetted in the real world. We've tested it in the peer review. We've tested it at the NGO level, and we've tested it in the political party level. This is really the next step, and we owe it to the voters to address this final question so that we do have that real world data on star voting. We even have attention from other countries, South American countries. Even Venezuela was considering star voting for their primary, and they ultimately said, we're not going to change yet, but we would love to see Eugene pass it so that we could cite that data, because this is the system that we're most interested in.
I have to say that it's hard to think about League of Women Voters as kneecappers.
We're not there yet. Right, not the league. I want to speak to this, though, because this is really a question that has come up for us time and time again as we've gotten prepared for this presentation. One of the things that is true is that the league really understands process, and process that voters and individuals like you participate in. If the situation were reversed and the Ranked Choice Vote Coalition had gone out and gotten signatures and gotten on the ballot on their own, doing the work, and that the only thing that was up for election was whether or not you did it the way you do it now or you rigged their vote, would you then invite another competitor to come and then in some way who hadn't done the work locally? I'm saying locally, I'm not talking about the state. If they hadn't done the work locally, would you then add that into the form? What does that say to people who have done the work in order to get on the ballot? So for me, it's a process question. It's not a yay or nay in terms of how you vote on this. Really, you will vote how you want to vote, as will I. But to honor the process of individuals coming forward, to be engaged, to actually want to be involved in our government rather than being disenfranchised. So I could go on and on, as you can tell, about this particular question. So me, again, it's a process question for our local vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, hi. So I am Emma Scott-Lavin. I was one of the people who stood in the rain, dealt with the wind and all that craziness out there to get signatures for star voting. Not the most glamorous job in the world, I will tell you, and took a lot of, most of the people out there just don't even want to pay attention to you when you ask them to sign a thing on a clipboard, right? That said, I personally collected over 3,000 signatures for star voting. One of the things that is very apparent to me, for me personally, I mean, you can just look at me and tell me, am I electable? Probably not, right? I don't have a chance in hell, according to our current system. I've also worked on other political petition campaigns, and I've seen the inside of the Democratic Party. I am no fan of the other side, but I will tell you, I've seen a lot on the Democratic side too that I am not particularly happy with. So I have a couple of questions, and you can answer which one speaks to you more. So one question, one big difference between star voting and ranked choice voting is in star voting, because you can give 5 stars to 2 candidates or even 3, whereas ranked choice you can't. What difference does that make? What difference will that make in terms of voters being able to speak their truth? The second is, let's say that star voting becomes okay, I don't know if that's a timer. So if star voting becomes, if it's successful here in Eugene and it starts to become a statewide or even national thing, what kind of future do you see? Can you paint a picture of status quo and a picture of star voting?
And are you addressing that to Sarah or to me?
I'm addressing that to Sarah. Thank you.
Okay. So the first question was, what are the impacts of being able to score multiple candidates equally, 2 candidates equally, 3 candidates equally? And what that means is that star voting scales really well. A lot of us remember the presidential primaries that had like 20, 22, 23 candidates, and that happened for both the Republicans and Democrats. And that's a nightmare with choose one only. If you're trying to rank candidates uniquely in terms of preference, first, second, third, 13th, 14th, 15th, that becomes very unwieldy on a ranked ballot. On a star ballot, even no matter how many candidates there are, you can score them all 0 to 5. You don't have to change the ballot formatting, and that has huge logistical implications. But for the voter, the real game changer there is that you can show that you prefer all of the candidates on your side, all of the candidates in your coalition over the ones who are opposing you. And the ability to have as big a coalition as you do and be stronger for it is a game changer. And so the second question is about the world that we hope to create with better voting. I think I led with that. For me, the reason I'm working on this issue is I think it's strategically our best chance to be effective on every other issue we care about most. So for me, and for all of us in the room, we have really critical life or death issues that are, catastrophic in our lives and in our world. And star voting, I think, empowers voters, levels the playing field, and gives voters the leverage to actually make a difference on the issues that we care about. What we see is that there's an almost statistically insignificant correlation between voter opinion and candidate votes. So our elected officials, when they vote on legislation, there's almost no correlation with public opinion. It correlates strongly with the money. Star voting would give voters the actual leverage to say, hey, you're not actually representing me, I'm gonna vote you out. With the current system, you can't vote against your incumbent if there's somebody worse on the ballot. So there's always a way to say, get in line or else. Star voting takes that leverage and that coercion out of our political process.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being out with a clipboard. That's the real work of democracy right there. Paul, we have time for one more.
I'm Paul Thompson, a City Club member for a long time. Can you give any examples of organizations that have adopted star voting and then subsequent to that decided to revert back to some other system such that it failed for them?
Not off the top of my head. And I know of some groups who had specifically said we want to try multiple systems and give them all a try before we make a final determination, but I don't know of star voting repeals yet. I do know that tons of places have repealed ranked choice voting, and that's not just organizations, that's cities. Ranked choice voting has now been banned in 5 states, and it's been repealed in dozens of cities where it's been used, often following outcomes where it didn't perform as advertised.
Thank you. Can I have one closing statement?
Yes, you may.
Great. I just want to close with this statement in terms of when we envisioned this discussion, we really envisioned it as voter education. And in the League's framework, when we do voter education, and we've done it for years, we look at a ballot measure, we look at, and many of you have been in the room when we've done this, and we say, this is what happens when you say yes, and this is what happens when you say no. And when I leave the room, you shouldn't know how I'm going to vote. And so that is how I approach voter education. So the neutrality that we're presenting to you from the League really stems from when we provide you information, we trust that you go and take that information and do what you want to do without influencing you in the room. So if it sounds like we were being a little mushy on this, it's because we are being neutral. We are not telling you how, the League is not taking a position. We are saying you, the voters, can get the information, dig, and then make up the decision. I just wanted to make that clear.
That's a good place to end. City Club's all about learning and taking that learning and translating it into action, and we hope that you all will do that and make an informed choice on May 21st. Please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you so much for having us.
This has been our March 22nd conversation at the City Club of Eugene. For those interested in learning more, the City of Eugene will produce a voter's pamphlet for the star voting ballot measure. That's measure 20-3. 349. Arguments supporting or opposing the measure can be placed in the pamphlet if submitted by Tuesday, March 26th. That's the day after you're listening to this, most likely. So for more information, visit eugene-or.gov/518. We'll also put some links on our website for more information about star voting so that you can learn even more. Thanks this week go to Collaborative EDO for hosting the final session of Industry for Educators course. In this gathering, teachers and hosts compared notes about what they learned from each other and how that helps with educating students on becoming effective contributors to our economy. It's been a great course for a lot of people in our community, and many thanks to Mary Layton for organizing it. It is not a small lift, so thank you, Mary. Now, next week, it may be spring break for some, but really, folks, who needs the beach when you have City Club election programming? Certainly not me. So we'll be right back here Friday, March 29th, actually over at Carlita's at the top of the Gordon Hotel for our second candidate forum of the season, when we'll welcome the candidates vying for seats on the Eugene City Council. Until then, thank you all for being here, and good luck to the Ducks and the Beavers in the NCAA tournament. Peace.